So yeah, feel free to start typing out any questions that you guys have in the chats for me, and I'll just kind of start talking in the meantime. For if you didn't already know, I'm my how the show kind of got started, which is that I was, and let me know if I need to be a bit louder. I can always turn that up. So yeah, the show I was a background was before I was doing this show was in theatre. I was studying to do studying to like backstage work for like theatre and that sort of thing, and then on an internship while I was at university, I just kind of came up with like the intro for the show kind of came first, the hello and welcome to etc., and I kind of came up with that and sent that to my friend Zane, who has a bunch of podcasts stuff going on, has like a little collective is the word, not rather than network, I think. And just like, hi, what do you think of this? And the response was just, yeah, I want to listen to that. So spent about finishing up my uni degree, slowed it down, and then I spent a little while working on season 1, and then 2020 happened, and suddenly there wasn't theatre to be doing, and so instead the podcast and editing other podcasts and that sort of thing kind of became my main deal, and that's the main story. A man in a suit just ran past my window. So yeah, season 3. I think it went okay. I think people liked it. Just gonna angle that a bit better. I think people liked it. I hope you did, and if you didn't, please tell me. Yeah, or don't. Ow. Yeah. So yeah, feel free to have any questions you have about the show or anything in the chat whenever you're ready. I think I've posted the link to the chat everywhere. I'm not sure if this was a good time for people as well. Inspirations for the show. Yeah, kind of. I mean, I like the shows where they have like TV shows and that sort of thing, where they like the Monster of the Week style show is I'm always a fan of that. And then I always like the way you can use that to build up a broader story over time. So one of my favorite shows was Fringe, and so that was kind of an inspiration. You might be able, if you've watched the show, you might be able to kind of be like, oh yeah, because it's the it's kind of like X-Files, where it's the common myths and conspiracy theories and that sort of thing, and then kind of twisting them and inserting them into your own story. That was a big thing I liked. And then as far as like other audio dramas, yeah, kind of to a degree, like a little bit Welcome to Night Vale, in as far as what kind of made me bounce off that in the end was the way that it built up an ongoing storyline and then kind of dropped that at a certain point, or like put that more in the background. So that was kind of a inspiration for me. And as far as, well, if I'm only ever going to make the show bigger, sort of thing. I mean, like, there might be ways that you can kind of organically shrink the narrative back down a little bit and kind of strip back a little bit, but I think that, yeah, I think I'm always conscious that forward momentum in the narrative is quite important, and having to make sure that it always feels like there's a destination it's going to, even if it's just like a stop along the way, not letting it feel like it's slowing down unless it's on purpose, is kind of the vibe, I guess. Yeah. So yeah, it's inspiration wise, it's kind of like things that I want to be writing about as well. It's I kind of write it in terms of what I would want to be writing, because I'll kind of make it whatever I want to be writing that day. Kind of is able to slot in with the way that the narrative works in this show. Did I originally intend to bring Glossways and other larger plot elements into the mix when I set out to create the series, or was that something gradually developed as conceptualized and wrote out the podcast? So a combination of both, really. I always intended that there would be broader plot elements that would start coming in, but the specifics were not there at the beginning. Season 1, in particular, which is almost all standalone stories, except that some of the standalone stories wind up becoming quite important, like the Man and the Clockwork Mother, that sort of thing. I wrote all of those stories as standalone because when I was writing season 1, I didn't know what the show was necessarily. I knew that it was a museum of strange and weird things. I didn't really know what the tone was. It was whether it was kind of more government conspiracy sort of minded, and is the museum a museum, or is it more of a containment facility sort of thing? And obviously it became a museum. So there was always meant to be a broader plot coming in, but the specifics are always developing along the way, where it was like I come up with a story about the glassways, and then it's like that's something that should have bigger consequences and bigger implications, and then I kind of am able to tie that in with the other things that are actively going on. So like I tend to come up with a like an end point for for like a storyline, and then I kind of like this is where this storyline or the broader arc of the show is going to go, and then I kind of work towards it and I let it change. I know what I'm working towards, but then as the characters, or for most of season 2, the character with what's going on, I let that shift, and I let that kind of develop in a more organic way. Because another odd inspiration would kind of be like a Game of Thrones and or How I Met Your Mother, where they in the show for Game of Thrones, they had the end point of what happened in the final season set in stone, because they were doing it based on the books, but then the show kind of developed feeling a bit different, so that when they suddenly had that ending, it didn't feel organic, it didn't feel right. So it's important to have an idea of where the story is going, but let the characters dictate that as well, and not it's all because like a story isn't a series of events, really. It's more like a series, like characters reacting to the events. Like an event is a thing that happens, and the story is how people react to that. Hopefully that wasn't too rambling. Do I have a favorite exhibit? It's difficult for me to say. I think that the Changeling is up there, certainly. I definitely I mean, I wrote that. I think that most people could kind of get where I was coming from with that one. I wrote that in a bit of an emotion. It was like I'm getting some stuff out, sort of emotional catharsis sort of way. So I think that one's pretty special. Other than that, it's difficult for me to say what ones are favorites, because I kind of hate them all. It's very, I'm very young, so close to it. It's very difficult for me to think of them objectively, because like I send a story to Zane when I'm finished writing it, just like, hey, what do you think of this? And I'm just like, the response is usually just like, yeah, good. And I'm just like, no, it's not. No, it's terrible. Because I have no idea once I'm finished writing a story, or even as I'm writing a story, if it's good. It's just, I'm just kind of putting pieces. I'm kind of mechanically putting pieces together in my head and then getting it out onto the page and figuring out how it all goes together and making it feel cohesive. And then by the time I get to the end, it's like, I don't know what I'm looking at anymore. Allegedly, it's a story. Yeah. when will season 4 start? I am hoping that it will be a similar sort of gap as previous gap between seasons, so 3 months maybe. I am about halfway in terms of word count. I'm halfway through writing it compared to how long season 3 was. But I'm also still kind of feeling out how part like I thought that I knew what the arc for the story was, and then sorry, my computer just told me it's going to restart to install updates, and no, it's not. Yeah, I am working. I'm working on it to make the story feel basically. I know where one of the storylines is going to end. I thought that was the whole storyline for the season, more or less. And then, as I've been writing it, I've realized no, I should probably actually this isn't actually a whole season's worth of story. And then I realized that I can have another storyline that I was intending on having kind of maybe happen later. I've kind of realized that I can work that in parallel to what I was working on. So the amount of work that will be going into it is probably like the same again as what I've already done. So it's kind of 3 months, hopefully, like end of October. I saw someone saying it's just like, oh, what if it releases in time for spooky season? And I was like, hopefully just barely. Yeah. So that's that. Are there any exhibits that I've seen people on socials that surprised me by how much they were enjoyed? I mean, I'm always surprised when people like the show. I mean, the biggest fandoms or hits with people are definitely the audio tour guide itself, followed by the cat and the bull, which is like, they're cute. It is what it is. That's not surprising at all. I introduced a cute cat and a cute bull, and it's like, well, what did I think was going to happen? I don't know. I think I'm not really that I'm surprised by how much they're loved outside of those, because I kind of write every story. Like the idea is that hopefully every story will be someone's favorite, you know. And I think that so far, like, I don't think there's a few stories I don't think people have really mentioned that much, but I think that it's fairly that I think that's going okay as far as like every now and again someone will mention a story that it's just like, oh, I really like that one. I was like, oh, cool. No one's really talked about that one before. So yeah, let me just bring up that document and see what the stories for this show are, because God, there's so many by now. There was definitely actually, well, The Wooden Crown is underrated. That was what I was thinking about, where it was just like, yeah, every now and again people mention that one. I was just like, yeah, that one, yeah, all right, thanks. I mean, it's not, I don't know, it's surprise or anything, but like when people were saying, oh, in the last episodes of season 3, it's like every episode someone would be like, oh, new favorite episode. I'm like, sure. I don't know. Is the show getting better? I have no idea. I'm too close to it. I can't possibly say whether or not the show is actually getting better. Hello, just joined. Yeah, so hopefully end of October. Hopefully 3 months, around that sort of time frame for season 4. Yeah. So it's difficult for me to say. It isn't really a question, but from the writing, seemed to have a lot of feelings about AI and personhood. I just like to ramble about that. I'm good at rambling. Yeah, I mean, having the idea that the guide would become more, I don't want to say human, because it's definitely not human, personified, yeah, it becomes more, it becomes self-aware, and that was definitely something that was going to happen from the start, and it was something was I was trying to make feel organic and that sort of thing, and not just be like, oh, it's suddenly happening, and that's kind of why things kind of go off the rails so quickly in the museum. Oh yes, the audio tour guide knows that you love it so much. Yeah, I mean, I always liked the AI characters in stuff like that. I've always enjoyed like the slightly different perspective, but also it's a perspective that was made by people. It's interesting uh, to kind of think about that, how they something that was created and very designed by a person, well, by people, but it isn't considered a person. I always like stories like that. You know, I always liked HK7 from the Knights of the Old Republic games. Always had him in my party. Yeah, and the way that in a lot of stories, I think that the artificial intelligence character is often a bit of a secondary character. It's always kind of either very utilitarian in that, oh, it can solve the problems sort of thing, or it's just kind of a secondary character. It's there to it does the maths, or it does the technical job. And I liked, as I was developing the audio tour guide's character, of instead of being it wants to be more, and it kind of feels itself becoming more, but it doesn't know what that means. And instead of having it's got kind of a technical job of knowing its way around the museum, but instead it tells stories. I liked that as an idea of having an artificial intelligence being that is kind of artistic in that way. It's not just doing cold calculations. Does the audio tour guide have feelings, emotions? Does it validate them as feelings and emotions? Yeah, maybe. It's God, that's cold. It's one of those things where that's kind of part of what makes it interesting to write that, whether or not it feels emotions in the same way that we do, whether or not it should. It's kind of, I mean, in the context of the story, it's also an AI that kind of came about by accident and is partly kind of designed and partly just kind of developed. It's developed on its own and kind of created itself. So I don't know. I think that it thinks that it has emotions, and there's no real. It's like do other people feel emotions the same way that you do? And it's just like, well, expand that out to, does a creature with a completely different being feel those emotions in the same way? I think that that's an interesting kind of thing to have in the back of the head as something that kind of can't possibly be answered, whether or not it does. And that's kind of that's kind of like, as well, part of what the head of restoration's relationship with the guide is and is going to kind of be going forward, is that difficult kind of like figuring out whether or not she thinks that is feeling these things, is thinking these things, or if that's a completely mechanical, it is programmed to X. She kind of thinks of it as in terms of it's a machine, so it's an if then else sort of setup, and that's going to be part of the interesting part of their relationship going forward, is like whether or not that changes, because isn't it really? In humans, it's kind of a if then else sort of thing. We're also kind of organic machines. So what is the guide different because it's not organic? And also, should it be the same, or should it try to be different? Yeah. So that was that. Hopefully that was rambly enough. Oral tradition, a museum setting. Yeah, oral tradition is lovely. I like. Yeah. And the fact that the oral tradition, it can change over time, and like the retelling of the story is becomes part of the story. I always really like that sort of thing. It's yeah. Since Mistholme is a horror adjacent podcast, a lot of horror stories woven into it. Okay, what is my philosophy for writing horror? What kind of horror am I drawn to? So I'm not enormously into horror. Like, I like a horror movie sometimes. So I play horror video games a fair bit actually. I'm more interested in the kind of the creeping horror a lot of the time, or there's always the horror of just being a person with a horrible fleshy body, and all that sort of horror. Can relate to that. And then I see the thing about the horror stories in Mistholme in particular is that they don't always necessarily, like, I don't start that like, oh, this is going to be a horror story. Sometimes it starts out with, I start with an idea for what the exhibit itself is, what the item in the exhibit is, and then over time I'm just like, this is getting kind of horrifying, and I lean into it. And so like the spyglass in particular is an example of that, where it's it's like over time it's just like, well, this character who's very like not the sort of person who should be experimenting with something powerful and magical and seeing what he thinks are ghosts, what actually would happen is that one thing would lead to another and things would end very badly for him. Lean into the horror of that. And so I think in a lot of ways the horror that I'm interested in is kind of like the people making decisions that turn out badly for them is kind of a silly way of putting it. And also in horror, people making dumb decisions isn't usually a good thing, because it's usually a bit tedious and annoying. But yeah, I like the like the creeping horror, and the horror that is related to the characters, I think, is important. I watched The Ritual with my partner the other night. That was good, because it works in the main character's regrets and trauma into it. That was into the horror of it. It's kind of like the horror that he can't escape the mistakes he's made. Sometimes the way that it kind of develops in the stories is an implication, where it's like the boy with the horn in his head. It's just like, oh, it's kind of a sad fable-like tale. Oh, it's a happy ending. And then like the horror of maybe it's not. Maybe it's a very unhappy ending, and you will never really know. It's kind of the horror of, or the unnerving horror of never getting closure. Again, very rambly. I'm sorry. Head of Restoration. Talking about Head of Restoration. Yes. The Head of Restoration is going to still be around. Be adding a couple more characters to the cast as well. Trying to find the right balance. I've gone back and forth on a couple of expanding the cast, and then like actually consolidating the characters back down. So I'm not sure. I want it to always be getting kind of. Every time I kind of say it out loud that I want the show to always be getting bigger, that always sounds bad, because then it's just like, oh no, part of what makes it good, it makes it work, is that it's kind of small and personal. So it's always like a small and personal viewpoint of a world that's getting bigger. So we're going to have more characters, but the Head of Restoration will still be around. Sorry. Yeah, you did ask that earlier about whether there is a broader plan in mind for the show, or is it kind of slowly rolling out as you go. It's definitely a combination of both. So, like I said earlier, I kind of have plot points in mind, or destinations in mind, for like the broader arcs of the series, of the seasons, and that sort of thing, and then for the series, and then I let the characters find their way there. If that's not a wanky enough way of saying that. So in season, the example I want to use it because it's quite recent is season 3. I always had at the end of season 3, I always knew that would be the point where the arc would be wrapped up and all of the lost people would be brought back. But the reasons why it would happen were kind of shifted a bit. So early on, there was a version where the head of restoration was going to. Oh, what's that? This is Teapot. He was just licking something on the ground. So at the start of when I was working on season 3, yeah. So the element of this is Teapot. The element of the wish engine was something that was kind of there in some form or another from early on. Do you want to be here or not? Okay, wow, bye. But the reasons were kind of shifted. So I always knew that that people were going to come back, the people were going to be brought back, but why kind of shifted. So early on, there was an idea that the head of restoration was concerned and telling the guide to find someone in the museum, and the reason was going to be revealed that there was going to be a strange quirk to the museum that if it was ever left empty, there always had to be a person left in the museum, otherwise it would move on, and what moving on meant would be left ambiguous. And so the head of restoration was going to be insisting to the guide and to the mother that there must be someone else alive in the museum, otherwise it would have moved on. And the culmination of that arc would have been the head of restoration finally leading the guide to what would have become the head of the wish engine, or I think at this point it was more like an emergency override, some sort of thing like that. But it was the guy that she had finally accepted that the fact that the museum hadn't moved on meant that the guide or the Clockwork Mother or both were people, and so she accepted their personhood, which would have been a very neat way to wrap that arc up, and too neat, I realized in the end, because it didn't really rely on the people's reactions to the events so much enough. It didn't rely on. It wasn't the culmination of a series of decisions, the way that I think that season 3 wound up working a bit better with. Where it's not that, oh, here's what you can do to solve the problem, I accept you're a person. It's she thinks that the situation is so completely dire and unsalvageable, and the guide realizes that it is too, and so it does something completely rash by making a wish on the wish engine, knowing that it doesn't know what will actually happen. And it becomes the guide has to, instead of some arbitrary the museum or the universe declaring that the guide is a person, the guide has to make its own decisions and move forward and live with those decisions. So yeah, that's kind of this all started as me explaining how the broader plot is going to develop. But I think that's a good example where I know where season 4 ends. I know where maybe season 5 or 6. I'm not sure how I feel out how long the seasons are as I'm writing them. I kind of have the destination in mind, and then I let the narrative change the destination, because otherwise it could feel like it's kind of shunting to its destination, that they're on rails, whereas they have to dictate the narrative. Yeah. Do I have any exhibits I've wanted to write but couldn't work into the story for one reason or another? There was always something about time travel, actually, or something like that, or was always something I thought about working with, but the length of an exhibit felt too constrictive for a good time travel story to work. And there was also one about I had a silly idea very early on, like season 1 ideas, where it was like, and it was just like, it was basically built on a pun, but it also felt like it could the idea of a lepidopterist who accidentally causes a butterfly effect. Like a butterfly collector causes a butterfly effect. That was the whole thing. And I kept trying to figure out how to do it. And kept being like, what if he accidentally, like his whole life, he wants to find this one specific butterfly. He loves this butterfly, but it's extinct. And then maybe he travels back in time and accidentally causes it to go extinct. I'm just like, it feels like there's something almost there. And then it's just never coalesced in my head. So that story has just never happened. So that one's for you guys, because I don't know, it's just such a silly idea, but I just keep coming back to it every now and again, be like, could I write that? And no, the answer is no. Apparently, it's too big a concept, I guess. Wish engine boggles your mind. Yeah, the wish engine was definitely one of those things where, the way that it started out as, oh, the wish, maybe there could be something in the museum where, oh, there's an emergency override that lets you have a wish or something like that. And then eventually it was just like, no, it's more interesting if it's this eldritch, bizarre thing that shouldn't exist, which, something that powerful probably shouldn't exist. And kind of how they're having it develop to be kind of a foil to the guide, where the guide is very intelligent and self-aware, but it has almost no power. It doesn't even have a body of its own, and it relies on others to a degree, whereas the wish engine is enormous and physical and completely just a machine. It doesn't actually have like those sorts of broader thoughts like the guide does. Was kind of, I wanted it to be like, kind of after a season of the guide, realizing how much it can be, even though it doesn't actually have how much it can be, despite being so small. It encounters something that's enormous and nothing more than what it appears to be, and it's kind of a weird, terrifying kind of, hopefully unnerving kind of idea is what I was going for there. Each season has had more episodes than the next. Do I think the trend will continue? That is, I hope not. I don't know. Season 1 was just like talking with Zane, being like, oh, how should I develop this? I've not written a podcast or anything before, and Zane was like, well, you should have a certain number of episodes ready to release, and then release them. Don't try to keep up with the writing as you're going. So it's like 6 episodes felt good. And then for season 2, it was just like, well, all the plot beats I want to hit over the course of this, like I want to let the guides, because that one was really like, it was like an emotional journey for the guide as it thinks it's going to die, and then it's becoming more, and it's becoming more self-aware as the story goes on. And then they get to the end, and you realize that there's actually been a plot going on the whole time that I didn't realize, with the little hints hidden here and there about the man with the voice and the mirrors and all that sort of thing, and just realize there's a plot that's been it's been so focused on its own kind of what's going on inside it that it hasn't actually been aware of what's been going on outside. So I wanted to let that breathe and have that feel more organic and feel like it was going along at its own pace, rather than trying to cram it into a certain number of episodes, because I also always want to have the standalone stories in addition to the broader plot, because I know that some people will probably prefer one or the other, so I want to always have both going on. So having both going on means that I have to, as the plot gets longer, I have to have more interstitial stories as well, that sort of thing. And then season 3, I was planning on 10 episodes, and then it was just like, looking at, I actually did more planning than I had previously. And I actually, here are the beats. Like, it was based on like the guide meets the mother. They hear from the head of restoration. They go to retrieval. They upload. There's all these beats that have to happen with their conversations with the head of restoration, and then they solve the problems. And I'm just like, oh, that is not 10 episodes. That is 12 episodes. Ooh. So in the end, the season was 12 episodes. And I feel like 12 is a good number. I'm going to try to keep to 12 going forward. I feel like 12 is a good number for me to be able to get done in the amount of time between seasons and during season, like, because I'm writing while I'm also producing the seasons. I'm writing the next season. I try to have the entire story written out before we start the season. So yeah, 12 episodes a season feels good, because apart from anything else, if I managed, I've got this notion in my head that who knows if it'll actually work out, which is that like the first arc of three seasons has gotten us to 28 episodes, but then that means that that 28 episodes, so that's 72 more episodes to 100, and that breaks down into 6 blocks of 12, and then 6 blocks of 12 breaks down into 2 arcs of 3 episodes, and I'm like, oh, three season long arcs. Oh, and I'm just like, who knows if it'll actually wind up being like that. that's crazy amounts of planning into the future. So how many seasons planned? Maybe 9, but Jesus Christ, I can't possibly plan that far into the future. That is, no, don't. I can't commit to a number of seasons right now, but that sort of getting to 100 episodes feels like, that feels like such a round number. That really appeals to my stupid brain, where I'm just like, yeah, there's a real nice symmetry to all of that. So yeah, maybe. Merch plans, maybe that is a thing that I think about sometimes. There is a thing like with Patreon where you can set that up for like a tier thing. I think that Patreon just takes the out of the, yeah, that's something I've considered, but I can't really do the I'm not a graphic arts person. Zane does most of that stuff. I did make the thumbnail for season, the newer thumbnail based on the old designs and stuff that Zane did. But yeah, so I've talked to Zane about that a bit, but it's not something that's immediately planned. It could be. It's one of those things where it's just one like, oh yeah, that'd be nice, but also more work. Yeah, so we'll see. Be seeing more of the man with the voice like Honey and Chocolate and Coffee once in season 4. Season 4, it's one of those things where maybe. I don't think that this is one of the fun things where I've made this whole thing about this character's main trait is that he has a really nice voice, this really specifically beautiful voice. I'm just like, it's an audio medium. I've got to really nail that voice. So it's just like, yeah, holding off on actually having him be physically present in the show until I have enough money to hire John Hamm is the plan. Season 4, see, I mean, I'll just kind of give you guys the teaser, which is that season 4 is more about the search for the curator, where it's just like there is an like the curator is gone missing at the end of season 3, and it's just like, yeah, we'll be going beyond the museum itself. There'll be expeditions beyond the glassways, kind of as a combination of, hey, more exhibits. There's whole other worlds on the other side of these things, but also, hey, is our boss on the other side of one of these? Maybe we should find that. We should find them. So that's kind of the vibe. And it is kind of like mentioned in one of the in I think the first episode of the season. The guy is going to be like, hey, shouldn't we be searching for the man? And it's just like, look, we've got a lot going on here. Like, we need to find our boss. We need to get the museum back in running order. There's some other stuff that I won't be going into where the museum he's having a time of it. It's just like, let's not put too much on our plate is kind of the vibe. But the man, infuriatingly, for the characters, I think, is just always going to be a presence. They're always going to be like, just they'll turn over a rock and it'll be just like, the man was here, and it's like, damn it, how does he do it? Is kind of the vibe. I think he's just, and I think that the kind of the vibe that I want to go for with him for a little while is just and I have kind of already gone there, where he's just like, he's kind of just everywhere to a degree. But yeah, so yeah, he's going to continue being an important aspect as well. enjoy the character series in general, but some of the background characters have been mentioned or referenced more than just once. Amina D, the man with the voice. Yeah, I mean, Amina is a lot of fun. It's just like, I mean, I knew that as I was writing the Cauldron, that was where she started out. Yeah, as I was writing the Cauldron, I was just like, yeah, people are gonna like this. People are gonna like this character. And then as I was like writing the one about the bracelet, I was just like, Jazane is just like a little bit something for the fans. Here she is again. So yeah, I like Amina. She's just doing her own thing. She's very. She is. I think that a lot of people who listen to the show may have drawn Amina when they were growing up in the back of their school books or whatever as their OC, and she's that kind of character where it's just like she's just cool. Hell yeah, Amina, you do your own thing. You do your witchcraft. Other characters who are fun to write. Well, what other stories have I written? It was interesting writing season 2, knowing that it was the man that was being shown all these things. In like knowing that it couldn't really come through in the text too much, or the voice, whatever. But thinking about how he's reacting to all these exhibits, that was interesting, because he is going through the museum, he is kind of cleaning up after himself, sort of vibe, or whatever he's doing, but then he's also just getting a tour, and I liked thinking about the reactions that he would be having to some of these exhibits. I'm just looking at the list of stories to try to remember any of them. Oh, I liked the I'm trying. I like, it's one thing about these stories as well is that I write them based around like exhibits, and I'm just like, remembering what the stories are, and I'm just like, what the hell was the exhibit that this all kind of sprang out from? So the retrieval team story, like the monument to the fallen of the retrieval department. I liked writing that because I was kind of going for the slightly pulpy sort of thing. I read a lot of books by Matthew Riley when I was growing up, who is an Australian author who writes Michael Bay movies if they were novels, is sort of the thing that lots of people say, because there's just like an explosion and a car chase and a gunfight in every single chapter, and it's just absolutely dumb. It's the silliest shit. So I was kind of thinking about those books that I read when I was growing up, when I was writing that story, and thinking about like the very barely fleshed out characters that would kind of like exist to be in one gun, be mentioned a couple of times in a gunfight, and then oh no, we lost that one as well. Oh, sort of. That was fun to kind of do a bit of the very silly, pulpy, but still kind of like emotional, but also like silly in the emotiveness of it, where it's just like, oh, at the end, the main the last one alive, he sacrifices himself for the world. The world will never know his sacrifice. That was fun to write one of those stories as well, and just have like there's the jokester who dies first, and then there's the big guy who tries to hold them off, and that sort of thing, and then there's the leader who doesn't have any characteristics except that he's the leader. That was fun to write. Why does man not pet bull? I think that as I was writing that, I mean, it's just that was kind of a combination of like, and here's how I do overthink things. I did actually think about why the man wouldn't pet the bull when I was writing it, and I think that it was and I didn't wind up having a set thing. It could have been one of two things, which is that either he was concerned that bull would know somehow, like, oh, this is such a good thing, and if I get too close to it, it'll know that there's something up with me. He was concerned that the bull might react to him somehow, and also it was just kind of a kind of supposed to be like a tiny, and like these are all like such silly like obscure hints that I think that there's more like for re-listens is sort of the vibe that I was going for, where if you listen to it again, you might notice, hey, that was odd, where it was just it's the loveliest bull in the world, it's too kind to die, and this person doesn't want to touch that bull? What's up with that? Why doesn't this person want to touch the bull? And like, it's something that you don't really think about when you're listening to it the first time, but as you're listening to it the second time, maybe you go, hey, yeah, he didn't want to touch the bull. It's kind of the vibe. Oh yeah, I do mention that there are 6 departments, don't I? Any other questions? No, I think that's the first time everyone's pointed that out. Yeah, I do mention that there are 6 departments. Yes, yes, that was also kind of the vibe I was going for with in season 2, you're definitely supposed to think that, because in season 1, yeah, you are. It's just you're going on a tour of the museum, and in season 2, you are supposed to think that as well the entire time. And I don't think I have upset anyone in a bad way with that. I think that a lot of people are upset, do get upset by that, but in a good way, where they're just like, "What? I was lied to by a podcast. I can't believe it." So yes, I'm sure you would have pet the bull. I would pet the bull. Bull seems lovely. Yeah. So in any museums in real life I took inspiration from in terms of layout, audio tours, etc. If not, what's the museum we're visiting? Not really. I have visited museums before. Didn't wind up going into the Louvre because it seemed like far too crowded, but I did go to the Musée d'Orsay. And I went to the one in London, I don't remember what that one's called, and saw a couple of my favourite paintings there. Yeah, not really. If I'd gone to, so I went to, a couple of months ago, I went to Mona in Tasmania, which is I think it's supposed to be the Museum of New Art, which that could have been an inspiration for me if I'd gone to there before I started working on the stories on the podcast, because it's just such an eclectic, weird place. But instead, it just felt validating instead, where it's just like, yes, yeah, the way that I've set up this fictional museum does make sense. It does work because this other real museum is also kind of crazy. It's fine. I'm not my show isn't inconsistent. So no, not really specifically inspired by any one museum, because the museum in the show, I really want to avoid giving too much description about it. So that, because like, it exists in your mind is kind of what I'm going for, and that's why I don't give too much description of most characters as well, because when I start describing them, and like, maybe this is frustrating for some people, because I think a lot of other shows in the same genre as me do give more descriptors, but I want people to be able to imagine the stuff themselves, and like, you're going on a tour through the museum, and it's supposed to exist in your head to a degree, so I don't want to contradict you too much by describing the decor too much, because yeah, like, if I describe the decor 30 episodes in, and you're just like, well, I've been thinking about it wrong for 29 episodes, sort of thing. So yeah. The museum might get a name. Yeah. That will be a bit of a thing in the coming season. I will say that. That is the music. God damn my hair. They'll do. Yeah, the idea of the music, the guide, getting a name or changing its name from the guide, because it kind of considers audio tour guide to be its name if it needs one. It's something that is definitely on my mind as I'm writing season 4. That is something that is coming up. Especially as there's an element it turns out that part of Retrieval's protocols for going on missions to unknown places is that they don't use their own names. Like I mentioned in one of the previous episodes, that like just made sure the idea of like people being able to manipulate you that if they know your name, that was mentioned a few episodes ago, and that's kind of that is something that the retrieval agents kind of work with as well. So yeah, that's kind of it comes up, is the idea of the guide maybe changing its name or getting a name. Let's see. So yeah, have I missed any questions so far? Don't think so. Yeah, one of those things where so does the museum take applications when it has job openings, or do prospective employees find the museum? I think that they've a combination, maybe, because like I think that you can get a job the traditional way at the museum, but like part of me wants to say like it's the people find their way there the same way that that exhibits do, but then that I just like because then if that's the case, then what happened with D feels less unique. Like, yeah, so it's I think a combination, because yeah, D found her way there because the numbers station came into existence somehow and led her there. I think that's kind of, yeah, that feels like that was an unusual case. So I think that maybe you can just kind of apply, but maybe you don't know to apply unless you're already appropriate and worthy, as I say at the end. We've got a D fan in the chat there. Yeah. The numbers station is also just like one of those things where, like I mentioned earlier, I like I like working in conspiracy theories and that sort of thing. And that was one of the things where well, number stations actually exist, but there are conspiracy theories around them. That was one of those things where, like, early on, and it was partly because like I was influenced by being a big fan of Fringe, where it started out being more conspiracy theories was like the inspiration for a few early episodes where like, yeah, number stations, and then they had the Ivan Ivanovich, which was inspired by the Lost Cosmonauts conspiracy theory. So yeah, that's one of those things that is kind of shifted maybe a little over time, is like the sort of stories I'm inspired by, where it's kind of, I already had some fairy tales kind of vibes in the first episodes, but yeah, I've kind of moved away from the conspiracy theory stuff a little as time's gone on, I think. Yeah, looking at these things, yeah. Any other questions? Happy to answer them. Okay, first of all, I will tell Calvin and Teapot that you love them. I'll probably find Calvin in a second. He's probably just sleeping. Will we get more information about in which the museum exists or appears? I'd like to have many named countries or cities, because it's like one can imagine that it isn't even on Earth. Yeah, that's very intentional. Like, I like to think that just because I'm Australian doesn't mean that the museum is in Australia, or even this sort of vibe, or which it's one of those things where, yeah, I have an Australian accent, and so the guide has an Australian accent, but the guide doesn't have to be Australian. Australians, yeah, we're kind of gross. Yeah, it's one of those things where I try to leave ambiguous. And early on, I did mention locations a bit more. There was, I think that maybe I mentioned maybe in the Helena Fortuna story that it took place off the coast of America. I think because I was specifically referencing one ghost ship story in particular. Maybe I don't remember. I'll mention where I can help it because, yeah, like that's kind of the point where these stories could take place anywhere. The characters could be from anywhere. If you come from somewhere where you don't feel like you're represented that often, you can imagine that the characters or locations are more like your version of the world, which isn't the same as actual representation, but I feel like it's something I can, sometimes I intentionally try to give characters or locations a more specific feel and sometimes leave it ambiguous, so you can do that. I'm very much into the letting the listener build part of the world in their head vibe, if you can't tell by now. Any other questions? I feel like it's winding down a little, but yeah. Also curious where you guys are coming in from. I feel like probably like the vast majority of the listeners are from the Americas, so which is kind of why I chose this time slot. I hoped that maybe I'd be able to, like, this time slot would be just about doable for Western Europe, but it's like it is what it is. The world is too big. The curator is a little careless, leaving a cat to the whims of the museum so willy-nilly. The cat's doing fine so far. I don't know. You're in from Seoul. Wow. Okay. Hell yeah. Yes. Yeah. From the American Midwest. Yeah. Yeah. Nice. I see where the downloads come from to a degree. Yeah. South Korea has been popping up a little bit lately. So yeah, that's awesome. Thank you for tuning in. And yeah, Derry, you're from Utah or something, Southwest America. Nice. Yeah, I'm from Brisbane, Australia. It's lovely sunny day, and I'm not allowed to go outside because we're in lockdown. Iowa. I'm so sorry. It was, yeah. I've never been to America, the US. At this rate, I'm looking less and less likely that maybe that'll ever happen at this rate. The Australia and COVID aren't doing the best right now. Right, west coast of the US, right? Yeah, awesome. Yeah, it's crazy seeing all around the world. It's like because with Acast, which is what I'm hosted on, it gives me like a little map of the world, and it's like early on, it's just like seeing like country after country kind of pop up, just like someone listened to it here, and I'm just like, this feels like a much more wholesome game of like Plague Inc. or something, where I'm just like, oh, really hope someone in Madagascar listens, Yeah, it's been fun seeing where they pop up. Like I think I've got more than 70%, 70-something% in like North and South America combined, and then the rest is just kind of pops up all over the place. It's really been interesting seeing where people listen to podcasts around the world. Been getting a lot in India as well, that sort of thing. Yeah, it's rad. It's yeah, I see there's a yeah, it's kind of it's a global sort of medium. Anyone who can and can download it wherever you are, it feels really, really cool. And hopefully not too many of those people are just people on US military bases. It's kind of something that pops into my mind. It's just like, oh, is someone actually listening to me in Nigeria, or is that 7 a.m. in one of the surfboards? Maybe that's like Adelaide or something. Yeah. Right, I'm going to go and find Calvin, and then I think, unless you've got many more questions, put out any other questions you have for the time being, and I'll bring back an orange boy. God, he's shedding so much. Jesus Christ. It's winter. Why are you shedding like this, man? What are you doing? This is Calvin. He's my kitty. Teapot belongs to my housemate. He likes being held even less than Teapot. Teapot actually likes being held most of the time. Yeah. Yeah, he's done. Yeah, it's crazy down here. More about the museum's recovery from its time in lockdown in season 4. Yes, yeah, that is the other half. Like, so season 4, it's going to be partly, in addition to like standalone stories, it's going to be partly the an expedition through one of the glassways, and partly about the museum itself as it's kind of trying to recover from what's happened in lockdown. And there's a couple of other things that I won't spoil here that are making that difficult. So it's definitely not going to just be because we've had 2 seasons about how the music is in lockdown and things are bad there, and it would not be. We're not having so much of a time skip by any means where it would not feel odd to have it go back to normal. So yeah, that is going to be part of the narrative of season 4 is some of the things that are still a bit messed up there. Yeah, I could give you more than that, but I don't want to. I think that you can wait. While we're getting any more questions, I will also say, so I very much appreciate everyone who's supporting me on Patreon, and one of the main things on the Patreon is the ad-free feed, and there's obviously no episodes coming out, and I don't want you guys to just be getting nothing for the off break. So part of my plan for the hiatus, I guess, while I'm working on season 4, is I'm going to release some of the standalone stories that I have ready during the break, like instead of full episodes. I'm not going to start that just yet because I don't have enough stories written. But yeah, like I'll record and release. My city's in lockdown. We'll see how recording goes. I might record kind of a. Oh, he's back. Does he want to? I might record I'll record a version of some of these standalone stories from the upcoming season and release them exclusive to the Patreon. Okay. During the off season, to have something here for you guys. And going forward for season 4 and onwards, patrons will also get access to. Is he the orange gentleman? Oh. Go on. Episodes will be released on the Patreon a week early for patrons going forward. I wanted to make sure to mention that during this. I'll post that to the Patreon as well. People who have joined at the $20 tier where they get to name characters, I'll be getting them a list of like the characters sometime soon. And people who've joined at the $10 or higher tier after the season has ended, I will be getting in touch with them to put their names in the first episode of season 4 closer to its release. I try to remember to always get in touch with people before the episode comes out, to make sure I'm using the name they want me to in there. But I don't want to do that just yet. I want to do that closer to the date because I know that I feel like I have the sort of audience where people might change their mind about their name, or they might change their name entirely in the interim. So I want to make sure I'm getting the right name. So yeah, if anyone's been waiting for that to waiting for me to get in touch, that's why I'm just want to make sure that I'm getting those details right. Yeah, I think that was all the ad stuff. Oh yeah, also so yeah, since I increased the cost of that highest tier where you get to choose an exhibit, which was done mostly because that was proving fairly popular, and I was kind of running. I was slightly, but I was not going to be able to keep up with the writing of that many individual people's requests. Yeah, I think that maybe the cost of that highest tier might be too high, so I might. If anyone is just like, yeah, I've considered that, but it's too much for me, let me know. I'm always happy to drop it back down again a bit. It was just wanted to stagger the tiers a bit more because it was proving quite popular. And I can only write so much effort and time for me to write the stories. So yeah, I wanted to, yeah. Any other questions? Oh, okay. No, that's very valid. Have a good sleep. Thank you so much for coming along. Yeah, awesome. Good night. What day is it? Friday. Yeah, my week's been going okay. I ran ran a Dungeons and Dragons session for some friends last night. It went okay. All right. Is there any other questions from anyone? Anything at all? I don't think there was anything else that I've missed or that I had an inclination to mention. Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. Well, then I think I'll wrap this up here so it doesn't drag on too long for anyone who wants to watch the VOD, which should be available. I'll have to double check what the deal is with YouTube Live. But yeah, thank you so much to everyone who's come along. This has been a lot of fun. Always, yeah. And if you guys have any more add to it or improve about it or about the show as well, I'm always happy to, and especially for accessibility. That's the word. Because the transcript and content warnings and that sort of thing. Because everyone should be able to access the show in the way that they prefer. So yeah, if any further feedback on any of that, always happy to take that on board. Yeah, because podcasts should be for everyone. All right. I think that's going to be it for today. And thank you all so much for coming and for supporting the show. And as always, stay safe out there. Thank you too. Yeah.